Okay, we're right in the middle. Let's dive right in. Okay. The main question we were discussing is the principle or the concept. Are we concerned that money was returned? So let's get a little more context. You find a lost document. Is the presumption that a lost document fell from the lender, in which case obviously the money is still owed, or from the borrower? If it fell from the borrower would argue that he meant to file it away, but didn't have a chance to do so before he lost it. Now, obviously, generally speaking, if a borrower loses a document, there's some serious amount of negligence there. Because why wasn't the document altered or destroyed prior to it being lost? The fact that he allowed it to be lost is a serious counter argument to his claim.
Which is, I don't have to pay it.
In other words, the document is lost. The borrower says, "I lost it because I already paid it. I got the document back as the receipt." But the problem with that argument is, well, then why didn't you destroy it or void it?
Right.
You know, why is it that documents have? You did not behave normally. A normal person would not leave such a document around, unmolested. He would destroy the document or change it so that it would no longer. And this is the major counterweight to the first. The rabbi's opinion was that that we are not concerned about repayment. Sorry, 1 second. That's right. Yeah, the rabbi said we are concerned about repayment, meaning it might be that it's the borrower's document, and according to Rabbi Yossi, we give it back to the lender because we are not concerned about repayment. We're good? Now, the Gemara pointed out that this is just a major problem with this, which is that a woman who gets divorced loses her ksuba. We do not give it back to either the woman or the husband. And this would be true both according to the rabbis and according to Rabbi Yossi. Now, if we are concerned for repayment, if that would make sense. Maybe the husband actually got back the ksuba because he paid the ksuba and then he lost it. But if we are not concerned for repayment, then we should be giving it back to the woman. The husband has not yet paid the ksuba, and therefore the woman's entitled to collect. And yet nobody says once they're divorced, he gets document back. What's the reason for that? Must be nobody's concerned. Nope, everyone is concerned for repayment, both Rabbi Yossi and the rabbis. Everyone agrees that once the couple is divorced, the document is not given back to the woman or the husband. Meaning, because we're concerned, it might belong to the husband, i.e., we are concerned for repayment. Cheshinan lepiroin. Okay. What were the resolutions? One resolution was to switch Rabbi Yossi and the rabbis. That resolution didn't quite work because the rabbis are also concerned about repayment. So the final version was, you're right. The rabbis of the Mishnah are not concerned about repayment. They say harehu becheskasei. It goes back to the lender. And the brisa that seems to indicate there's a debate between Rabbi Yossi and the rabbis, it's all Rabbi Yossi. Rabbi Yossi says if the woman's already divorced, then you do not give it back to either the woman or her husband because we were concerned for repayment. However, if the woman's married, there is no payment to be made. Therefore, you can give it back to the woman. Okay. Rav Papa says, okay, meaning Rabbi Yossi is not concerned about repayment. And Rabbi Yosi l'divrayim d'Rabbanan ka'amar lahu. Rabbi Yosi is what we call in English. He's playing a partial devil's advocate. So in other words, he's saying even if you're right, you're wrong. That's basically his argument. Rabbi Yosi holds that you would give it back to the woman. Why? Because lo chashina lepiroin. We're not concerned for repayment, even if they're divorced. So why does Rabbi Yosi say that you don't give it back? He was countering the rabbis. Even if you're right that we shouldn't give it back after they're divorced, but at least admit that while they're still married, she should get it back.
Okay.
Because at that point the debt isn't due. Lididi, according to my own opinion, I feel in Rabbi Yosi is saying like this. According to my opinion, I would agree that even if the woman was divorced, we are not concerned for repayment, and it goes back to the woman. However, according to you, the rabbi's argument that you say that there is that we are concerned for repayment, at least when she's still married, give it back to the woman. 1 second. Because the debt isn't due yet. So there really is no concern of repayment. Rabbanon, and the rabbis say, Emer tzrori atfisa. We're concerned, okay. Tzrori atfisa, if you remember, we had it in Ksubas, it's come up numerous times. Is this concern the rabbis have that even when the woman's still alive, she can get, her ksuba may be somewhat collateralized. Tzrori atfisa basically there's a secret bags of cash that he gave her. And he said, when I die, when I'm divorced, or whatever it is, okay, could be a divorce is no shasha tzrori. The Gemara makes that point. The guy divorces his wife and gives her bags of cash. It doesn't make any sense. The Gemara considers that possibility. Regardless, in the case of a widow, it could be if the guy is deathly ill, he doesn't want his wife to have to collect through the whole process. Mm-hmm. So he apportions bags of cash for her to take.
You have to pay ketubah upon divorce?
So yes.
Yeah. Okay.
And it's so it's 200. So it's between what do we say? I think it's between $5,000 and $30,000, depending on which rabbi I ask.
Quite a margin there, but
yeah, exactly. Okay. Generally speaking, 200 so is supposed to cover minimal expenses for 1 year, but that's minimal. It's not 2-bedroom detached house. It's a shared apartment somewhere. Okay, Ravina says, okay, so that's Rapap's Towers. Ravina Amar Lo'elam Epach Kamaisim. Time to Rabbanon Hachamishim Chashin L'Shtei Ksubas. 1 second. Okay. So Ravina goes back that we're going to switch it around, meaning the rabbis are not concerned. The rabbis are concerned for repayment. Rav Yosi is not. Rav Yosi, I'm sorry, 1 second. Sorry, the opposite. The opposite. Sorry. Rav Yosi is concerned for repayment. The rabbis are not. So Rav Yosi makes sense. Rav Yosi is concerned for repayment. Therefore, you never give back a document, even the ksuba. The rabbis are not concerned about repayment. Okay, if that's the case, then why is ksuba different? Why by ksuba, if the rabbis are not concerned for repayment, why can't you give the woman back her ksuba? She's divorced, give it back to her, let her collect, because we're not concerned the husband repaid it. Okay, the problem is, we're concerned there might be 2 different ksubas. Let's say ksuba was lost or something, or he wrote 2 of them, so we don't know, and maybe one of them was already collected. So therefore, ksuba is unique. In case of ksuba, we are concerned we can't give the document back to the woman because we're concerned there might be an extra document. Rabbi is not concerned that there might be 2 documents that are eligible for collection. Okay, Amr Blazer says, okay, this is next small passage is an interesting one. So let's describe a document. What is a document? You have article. I think it's a fancy chart there. Yeah. Excellent. If you look at the article, they'll give you sort of a good idea. A little more than 2/3 on 7B.
Okay, first word of the line is going to be
Subais. Look at the next line. Bishashnem. Amr Blazer. That's right. Amr Blazer. Okay, let's explain. What's a typhus? What's a tariff? So basically, But I remember when I got married, I went to the store and I bought a ksuba. Now, what does that mean? How do you buy a ksuba? Right, ksuba is a document.
Right.
Well, the answer is that, and if you're an Ashkenazi Jew, at least for sure, and to a lesser extent, it's less true if you're a Sephardi, but it's not like it's totally untrue either. There's a very standardized ksuba. Every Ashkenazi couple uses virtually the identical ksuba. Now, there are some different minor variations, but none of them are significant. And okay, some people choose one way, some people choose a different way. There are some very minor variations. But basically speaking, you're down to 2 or 3 versions of a ksuba. So exactly what Jules said, what do? You buy fill in the blanks, right? You buy a blank document, but it has written on it, it has all the details. It has the whole document. It just doesn't have the details. Certain things you'll have to actually write up by hand. What do you have to write?
The name and the date, the place.
The name, the date, the place. And the witnesses, a couple more things. Sometimes you'll have to write the date. Sometimes they'll write additional words that are like critical for the document. Okay. So typhus is sort of a blank form for like a contract. They have standardized contracts online. You go to a no-name law firm, they'll just print you out, what they keep on stock. And then you fill out the blanks. Okay, now. So again, so there's 2 halves. The fill in the blank form is called a typhus. It's called a form. The tariff is the witnesses, it's the date, it's the amount. Now, some of this stuff is repeated. Some of the stuff in the form is also in the tariff, like the amount, for example. It could be repeated twice in the document. Part of the reason for this is that, so there are all sorts of forgery protections built into a document. We'll discuss that toward the end of Basra. We discussed it a little bit in Ksubas. Without getting into too much detail, but how do you know that maybe they added a line to the document? So the rule is the last line of the document has to be a brief summary of all the other lines of the document. And if you have 2 such summaries, well, you know exactly what happened there, right? So, and the document's always written on a document that's erasure evident, like a check. You try to erase it, you'll see it. So, okay, so this is sort of a forgery protection built in the document. That last line is considered typhus, not tariff. So that's why you'll always have some details of the tariff also in the typhus. Okay, now somehow in this document, very interestingly enough, the tariff and the typhus were separated. If you look in the art scroll, they have a nice picture there, and they were in 2 separate areas. Obviously, you might have to have the last line of the typhus extended a little further, but okay, roughly speaking, it would be accurate. So what happens? So again, we spoke about the 2 guys that are grabbing the documents, right? We said this is a yachleiku. They split the document. If the document is found by a third party, there's no yachleiku. But if the borrower and the lender are grabbing it, we say yachleiku. Yachleiku means 50-50. So says Rabbi Lazar, some limitations here. Machlekes b'shneim adukim b'typhus, when they're both grabbing onto the typhus. Typhus again is the form, the fill in the blank. Ushneim b'tyrif, or they're both or they're both grabbing onto the tyrif, meaning the details. We'll have to explain this. So if they're both grabbing both parts equally, let's say, for example, a document was written down in landscape and they're grabbing the portrait side, right? So they're both grabbing effectively equally, right?
Okay.
So, well, then they split it equally. Let's say, however, the document was written landscape or portrait, either one, and they're both grabbing it the same exact way, and the document is split top and bottom, and they both grab they scrunch the paper in their hands. And remember, this is, by the way, it's cloth, so it's a little stronger than, right? They didn't have armada and tree junk. It's a little stronger than, but it crumples nicely. It makes a nice sound. Anyway, so they're both grabbing onto one guy's grabbing onto the end of the document, which has the details, or the opposite. The beginning of the document has the details. The other guy's grabbing onto the form. And then one guy gets the form, one guy gets the details. We'll have to, obviously, it's not quite going to work that way, right? Can't work that way.
No.
Because if you split the document with the details in the form, well, you have nothing. Okay, well, let's continue. We'll explain. For Rebbe Yehudah, it doesn't make a difference. If it doesn't make a difference, you both split it equally. What about the fact that the Brisa says each one takes what's in his hands? Like the tariff is in the middle. What's the chiddush? The mikra v'gabe dechad. it's closer to one guy. In other words, they're both grabbing the edges. The turf is in the middle. Even if it's closer to one guy, he wants to split it and get the turf. Divided over the other axes, and therefore, and the turf will be split evenly. Okay. Effectively, what the Gemara here is saying is that Rav Yechon does not disagree with Rabbi Elazar. Rabbi Elazar says that they split turf typhus, and so does Rabbi Yechon. Except that Rabbi Yechon is pointing out if the turf is in the middle, then they split the document equally. Okay. The Ravina, Ravina from Rav Difti said from Difti says to Ravina, the Rabbi Elazar Amar Zenat the typhus Lomali. Well, imagine you split the document, right? One guy gets the. By the way, sorry if my speech is a little slurred today. I just had some dental work yesterday, and it's causing that.
What?
I said, I'm
Now
sorry
it
if my
makes sense.
speech is a little slurred today. I have some pain in the side of my mouth, and okay. Okay. Now, where were we? Okay. So now, if you split the document, turf and typhus, right?
Okay.
Then what does each guy get? Nothing. Two worthless pieces of paper. So the Gemara says, like, what do you want it? You want to cover your jug with it? Stick it inside. Like, what's the purpose of wasting a document by splitting a Torah of typhus?
Mhm.
So Amar Leisi says to him, you're right, Ludami. We're talking about here for the money. Okay. So now we get into very interesting territory. So what do we have here? We have a document for $100. Now we have to evaluate what is a form without the details worth, and what are the details add to the form.
Right.
Okay, so let's explain here. If a guy has a basic form, okay, it says he owes him money, and it's written down, let's say by hand. There is some value there. However, keep in mind you cannot collect property with that document until there's witnesses, until there's a date, many other things.
Okay.
So what's the value of the document when it's not able to collect mishubadim, or when it is? That difference is collected exclusively by the guy that has. So significantly larger value to his deed. In other words, monetary value. What does that mean? The guy who's grabbing the turf explains as follows: a document that has the date in it, what's it worth? It's worth a lot more. Or the less bezman kamashavi. And if it doesn't have, what's it worth? Less. Okay, if it has the date on it, you can collect from mishubadim. Mishubadim are properties that were indebted to the loan. Properties that have a lien in it. So, for example, imagine a guy takes out a mortgage on his house. The mortgage is now, there's a lien on the property to pay the mortgage. Let's say he sells the property but doesn't pay the mortgage, right? And then the mortgage company can go collect from the buyer. That's what it means to collect from mishubadim. That sold property is called mishubadim. Now, let's say the mortgage was an oral mortgage; it wasn't written down anywhere. Then, according to Jewish law, you would not be able to collect from mishubadim. You wouldn't be able to collect this property. Okay. So that's the premium the guy grabbing the Torah gets. Okay. Now, once we mentioned, two people grabbing a document. We said one guy's grabbing the form, one guy's grabbing the details. We're saying here, potentially, there's a split. What does it mean it's split? It's split in value. It's not actually split. Okay, so now that we mentioned that, you should know that the whole Mishnah that says Yachloiku by the talis, it means value. Because if you're not going to say this, let's say you split the talis. Talis, again, does not necessarily mean a religious garment. So you're going to say that you actually take a scissors and cut it in half. You're causing a loss. So Gemara says, well, there's no loss here because actually what you get is two small talesim, cloaks, whatever it is, and they could fit children. Okay, so the Gemara says, okay, well, maybe it means v'hadam rava. It refers to what Rava mentioned. If the talis had gold in it, you split it. Doesn't mean that you split the talis, you're causing a loss, cutting up the gold. So the Gemara says, the small talis now with the gold string in it, it could still be used by people of the king, the princes. Okay, so Gemara says, well, it must refer. In other words, okay, so now we're still back to the original question. What's the proof that it has to be financial value and not actually splitting it? So Gemara says maybe it's from here. Two people are riding an animal. Okay, well, they split the animal. Well, how exactly do they do that? Each one gets half a carcass. How has to do it? They're causing a loss. Okay, so Gemara says Bishlema Tahira. If the animal is kosher, Chasi Labasar. Maybe actually they do split the meat half and half. El Tmeya. But if the animal is non-kosher, how has to do it? They're causing a loss. El Dami. It must mean value. Hachanam Dami. It must mean value. So yeah, it's true. You can't really split a non-kosher animal. Carcass isn't worth what the live animal is worth. And therefore, splitting must mean financial value. So in other words, you sell the horse, they both grabbed, and you split it, each one gets 50-50. Okay. The next Gemara is it seems very intuitive. I'm going to try to be the one here to remove your intuitiveness. Okay. 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 So I'm taking a little bit of a detour. It's not quite necessary here. You will need it in 2 days. So it'll be on Sunday. Okay. I should mention as well that I'll be going away for Shabbos. Rabbi Brown will be leading tomorrow.
Who's running the show tomorrow?
Rabbi Brown. Okay. Okay. Let's go through this briefly here. Let's try to go what our traditional understanding was. Our traditional understanding is a principle called Zachan la'adam shalai b'fanav. In print, what does this exactly mean? So, for example, I decided like Jules, I'm going to buy him a lottery ticket. So I go to this. It's a lot of money now, right? This just driving by the highway. It's like $650 million or something.
Oh boy.
So I went to the lottery store and I bought Jules a lottery ticket. Okay, does Jules actually own the lottery tickets? Now we're not going to pretend that Jules is going to win because nobody wins the lottery. That's a fact, undisputable.
There's no stated.
But
The question is, was there any stated intent, or is it just
no, stated
even if you say it out loud, does
stated
it
intent.
Does it
Stated intent.
Does it constitute a commitment?
Stated
to
intent.
pass over?
No. Stated intent. I'm acquiring it on behalf of Jules.
But Jules doesn't know.
He doesn't know. So there's a general principle we have called Zachan la'adam shalai b'fanav. Zachan la'adam shalai b'fanav means I can acquire something on somebody's behalf, provided that it's a zechus. What does a zechus mean? A merit. Meaning, is it something that Jules would want?
Something good for Jules.
If it's good, then presumably he would want it, and I'm allowed to do this. Similarly, I could buy you a present and I can have him own it directly. That's the idea of Zachan la'adam shalai b'fanav. The idea is that he would want it. Presumably, he would appoint me as a messenger, and therefore I can act as in his place to give him good things. Now, what happens? Can I perhaps take out a loan in his name for myself? Probably not, right? Because he wouldn't want that, presumably. That idea is called Ein Chavin La'adam Ela B'fanav. He's present, and he can authorize. If he's not present, they can't do it. Okay, now here's a little bit of a catch. Somebody loses a wallet on the street, okay? And I see the wallet, great idea, open it. In this case, I'm causing some amount of difficulty for the original owner. If he finds it now, well, he said losers, losers reapers, finders keepers. If he's not Jew, now obviously we'll see if he's Jewish. We'll have a whole second parak, the mitzvah of Shabbos Veda. We'll get to it. If he's not Jewish, there's no mitzvah of Shabbos Veda. So now I'm causing him a loss. Can I do good for you but cause a loss for him?
You can't.
That's
Okay.
that's not so complicated. That's not. It's not the same. I'm just trying to point to you. It's not exactly the same thing as Zachan la'adam.
You need to do both.
What is the story? That's our Gemara now. But I'm just trying to point to you that would seem to be intuitive with the general principle of Zachan la'adam shalai b'fanav with regard to a lost object, what we call a mציעא or an aveda. It's a little bit more nuanced than that. Okay. Yeah, it did take a while to figure this out. Yes, we couldn't figure out why the regular rule of Zachan wouldn't apply. Amaran bar Kamma. Although we will get to it again. We'll come back to this. Amaran bar Kamma. Zois Meres Magbi Mציעא Chaveri Kana Chaveri. From our mission, it's clear. Again, our mission, both of them found a lost object. From our mission, it must be that if you pick up your friend's lost object, you can acquire it for your friend. Meaning, so in this case, me and Hillel were both grabbing onto a talus. We both get to split it. That means that we both picked it up to acquire it on each other's behalf. Now, it doesn't quite make sense. It doesn't quite make sense. We'll get to the detail. We'll get to more details in a few minutes. Which scenario of the mission we're learning this from is a little complicated. We'll get to it. Okay, that's the message. You can, in other words, lost object does have the rule of zachin, and we could acquire it on each other's behalf, as opposed to saying that well, we're causing financial loss and we will not employ this rule. If you say that it is not acquired, well, if the rule isn't in place, then how could if both of us pick it up? We both acquire it for each other, and therefore both acquire half. Well, if none of us acquire half, then nobody owns anything. In other words, in order to acquire something, you have to lift the whole thing up. In this case, neither of us lifted the whole thing up. We each lifted up half. It must be that our half lifting was half for ourselves and half for our friends, the other guy. And that's how we both acquire it. As a matter of fact, I'm really gonna do the spoiler alert now, and I will spoil it for you. Okay, but keep that in mind because when the Gemara asked the question, there was no spoiler. It wasn't a spoiler. Okay, the scenario of the mission we're going on is this scenario. Me and Hill pick up the item. We both admit that we each picked it up at the same time. And the halacha is we split it without an oath. Okay, very clearly here. Well, neither of us picked up the whole thing. So how could it be that none of us acquired the whole thing? So how could it be that both of us acquired it? It must be that by picking up half, we're acquiring half for ourselves and the other half for our friends. And each of us is having this intention, and therefore the whole item is lifted up and we both acquire it. Make sense? Okay. Rava disagrees here. Rava disagrees with the concept of applying zachin to a lost object. Period. According to Rava, you cannot acquire a lost object with the principle of zachin. Okay, so if that's the case, then how does me and Hill acquire the item? We'll talk it out outside before we see it inside. There's a different principle there. Okay, let's say me and Reuven are partners in Thievery Incorporated, right? We steal, right? That's what the Ganav always used to say. Rabbi used to say he has to make a living, so he would steal. So we have business of stealing. Now, the general rule here is that ain't shleich l'dvar avera. If Reuven sends me on a mission to steal, I am personally culpable and he is not. Zero. There's no culpability. However, if we're partners in crime, we agree to steal a whole house together, then we actually acquire everything halfway. Why is this? Now, this obviously, this is not zachin. Why is it not zachin? There's no merit here because we're causing pain, we're causing loss to the original owner who actually owns the stuff and isn't happy that thieves are running around his house. So there's no principle of zachin there. Yet, at the same time, we both, as joint thieves in a joint operation, we both steal everything 50-50. Why is this? Because of a different principle called migu zachin l'nafshi zachin am l'chav. Because we acquire it for ourselves, we can acquire it for a friend as well. What's the difference here? Zachin, in order for zachin to work, zachin would be, I'm not acquiring it. I'm acquiring it only for you. No. It's not going to work if we're causing pain here to the original owner. We're good? However, migu zachin afshi zachin am l'chavre, because I'm acquiring it for myself, I'm also acquiring it for a friend. That means by picking it up, I get 50, my friend gets 50. And when he picks up, he gets 50, I get 50. Meaning he picks it up half for himself and half he sends to me. Because he's also acquiring half, he can send the other half to me. Even though it's a demerit for the victim. The victim here being the original owner, whose thieves are running around his house. So Rava says as follows: if both of us agree we're picking up a lost object, even though we're causing a demerit to the original owner that lost the lost object, because we're both acquiring it for ourselves as well, we can invoke the principle of migu zachin l'nafshi zachin am l'chav. We good?
Mhm.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Okay.
A little bit more.
Okay, well, let's see inside. So Rava says as follows: you're trying to invoke the principle of there is no proof that the principle of zochen, acquiring a merit on behalf of somebody else, works in the case of a lost object, because it could be a lost object is not a merit, because to the victim, the guy who lost the object, it's a demerit. Now somebody's taking his lost object, and we would not invoke the principle of zochen. You cannot acquire that lost object to your friend. But if you acquire it also, meaning I'm picking up for myself and my friend, we don't need the principle of zochen. We have a different principle to invoke. It's called migud zochen afshi zochen am lechavri. Because I'm getting it for myself, half for myself, I can get half for my friend too.
But that doesn't change the fact that
That's an alternative principle, and that principle works even when there is a victim, even when there's a demerit to somebody.
but there's still the demerit to somebody.
True, and that principle does not care about the demerit. The idea here is if I completely give it to somebody else,
Yeah.
that would have to be a merit exclusively. If I acquire for myself as well, then you don't need to be an exclusive merit. There could be a demerit there as well. Just like the thieves that jointly steal,
Yeah.
they acquire it half for themselves, half for their
Yeah.
co-robber,
Yeah.
and we don't, because we don't need the principle of zachan. We use the principle of migud zachan afshi. If you're acquiring it directly, even if there's a demerit to somebody else, you can acquire half of it on behalf of your friend as well. Okay. The reason here is over here, because you're acquiring half, you can pick up half for your friend as well. Tay, I'll prove it to you. Let's say I send a messenger. I say, go rob a house on my behalf. The ganav, and he robbed it. What's the law? Potter. The one who sent the messenger is completely exempt. Ein shliach dvar averi. Can't appoint a messenger to sin. However, if you have partners that rob together, chayavin, the partners are both jointly liable. Why is this? My time, because even though there's a demerit on behalf of the victim, however, it does make a difference. If you acquire it on your own behalf and your friend's behalf, then you can acquire something even when there's a demerit to somebody else. Shema mina, that's the proof. Rava says, migu. Now that we say we have this principle, if you acquire it on your own behalf, you can acquire it on your friend's behalf. We can apply it in the following scenario. We have a deaf man. Deaf man is considered crazy, by the way, so he's deranged, and biblically speaking, he cannot acquire anything. The rabbis sort of allowed him to acquire things because of basic society functioning. People can't just steal from people who are deaf and deranged. It really deaf here obviously means deaf mute, like it always means, unless noted otherwise. Okay. So what do we have here? One second. Okay. Since the deaf man acquires it rabbinically, so therefore the intelligent man also acquires it. So the Gemara says 1 second. The Kamagvale Bendas, I would understand why the normal person, he acquires it half for himself, half for the cheresh. So that's why the cheresh, the deaf man, actually acquires it, biblically speaking, because somebody else is giving it to him. However, the problem here is, how does the normal guy acquire it? Because the cheresh can't acquire it on his behalf, because he's a cheresh, he's crazy.
He's what?
He's deranged.
Oh.
The cheresh, a deaf man, means a deaf mute and deranged.
Oh,
It's all one package. Whenever the Talmud says a cheresh, it typically means a deranged person. Okay. So we have a very interesting scenario, right? The normal guy could pick it up, acquire for himself and the cheresh and the deaf man, the deranged man, but the deranged man can't pick it up and acquire it for the normal man, which means effectively that the normal man can't acquire it either, which means that nobody should acquire anything. Right? It's a circle that never starts. If it never starts, nobody acquires it. And for each one to acquire that, the whole thing has to be picked up. But the normal guy can't acquire it because the cheresh is picking up, can't acquire it on his behalf, which means that his acquisition that would acquire it for the normal guy doesn't either happen. So there were no chickens and no eggs. Very simple. Okay? El Pekach my kana. El Ema Cherish kana Pekach like kana. Okay, so the Gemara says you're right. The deaf man acquires it and not the normal guy. So the Gemara says my migu. What exactly is the migu here? In this case, the Cherish acquires it rabbinically, and the normal guy doesn't acquire it because he can't acquire it. So what? There's no migu. There's no migu here. Migu meaning since I'm acquiring it for myself, I also acquire it on behalf of my friend. If only one person is acquiring it, obviously the principle isn't valid. It's not relevant to be invoked. So Gemara says, "My migu migu the shnei charoshin ba'alma kanu hanami kani." So Gemara says, 1 second. So Gemara, okay, so now the Gemara says, well, maybe it means that since two charoshim together could pick it up for each other, so here two deranged people could pick it up for each other. So maybe one deranged person could also pick it up for himself, even if he picked it up together with somebody else. So the Gemara says, "Hi, my." Not necessarily is that the case. This is not quite true because in this case, each deranged person picked it up exclusively for himself, not for his friend. They're deranged. If you don't acquire for yourself because you can't acquire the whole thing and you didn't have in mind to acquire it on behalf of your friend, so then nobody gets it. So Gemara corrects itself, and this is the final resolution. Since the normal guy does not acquire it because he doesn't have that deranged person can't give it to him, so therefore he can't give it to the deranged person either, and nobody acquires it. Why is it different than two? Why is this different than two deranged people that could acquire it together? So Gemara says, over there it's a rabbinical decree that they both acquire it together. But that is different than a normal man and a deaf man. Normal man and deaf man, none of them acquire it. Two deaf men, they both split it, and that's rabbinic. Even though technically speaking, it should not be the case because neither of them have in mind the other person, so there shouldn't be any kinyan at all. Okay. Over here, he thinks because the normal guy doesn't acquire it, I should get it. But the problem is he can't get it because he didn't pick up the whole thing. The normal guy picked up half. Okay. Okay. How does Rami Rachama get this idea that in our Mishnah we have the principle that you could acquire a lost object for your friend exclusively? In other words, what we call and we invoke the idea of Zachan L'Adam. It is effectively a merit, even though there's a minor demerit on behalf of the victim, the guy who lost the item. But it doesn't make a difference. It's still the idea works. Which scenario in the Mishnah do Rami Rachama? So I've already spilled the beans to you. And I've told you the scenario is the last scenario in the Mishnah where the guy admits, right? In other words, they both admit they picked up a lost object together. The lawyers, they split without an oath because effectively they admit each one gets half. Well, that admission that each one gets half tells me that they both acquired it for each other. Again, Rava would argue that that's Migud Zachal and Afshin. Rami Rachama says that this is Zachal Adam Shlei B'fanav, or Hamagbiya Metzia Chavera Kana Zachal Adam. It's B'fanav, but it's Hamagbiya Metzia Chavera Kana Chavera. Okay. Okay, Inem Mirashis. Let's go through. We're potentially Rami Rachama would find a source that they can pick it up for each other. Inem Mirashis. Shnaim Talis. They're both grabbing. Each one says Kula Shli belongs to me. So the Gemara says Pasam Haikam or Kula Shli. Vanog ba Agbohata Kula. Vahayam or Kula Shli. Vanog bas Agbasa Kula. In that case, they're not admitting that they picked it up for each other. Each one says it's exclusively theirs. So there's no proof to Rami Rachama because in this case, each one's picking up for themselves, not for their friends. Elamehaf, the next scenario. The Tani Zamar Kula Shali, Zamar Kula Shali. Hatsulamali. Why does the Mishnah have to give two examples? Each guy says, what is it? Yeah, each one says, I found it and it's all mine. Why does the Mishnah repeat itself? The fact the Mishnah repeats itself, that second scenario is coming to tell me that I could even pick it up on behalf of my friend. It's called the Mishnah Yisera, an extra line. The Mishnah that teaches you. But the Gemara says, no, it doesn't teach you. It doesn't teach you that because you've already established. Why does the Mishnah repeat itself? One is for a scenario of Aveda, a lost object, and the other one is a scenario of a sale, Mekach Memkar. We both bought something. Each one of us says, we bought it first. Elam Hadatani, Zamar Kula Shali, Zamar Kula Shali. Hatsulam, Elam Mishnah Seir, Shraman Ambil, and Silchav Karnach. The Gemara says, Valkimna, Resham Metzia, V'Seif Mekach Memkar. We explained the two lines in the Mishnah. One refers to a lost object, one refers to a sale. Elam Miseifa, it's in the end of the Mishnah. Zemer Kula Shali, Zemer Chatzi Shali. One guy says it's all mine. One guy says it's half it's mine. 1 second. One second. Give me a second. Oh yeah, the next scenario. One guy says it's all mine, the other guy says it's half mine. We picked it up at the same time. Why is that necessary? Obviously, that's the implication of the Mishnah. It must be an extra line in the Mishnah. So Gemara says, no, it's not extra. It's not talking about a lost object. It's talking about a sale. What's the chiddush? Okay. Let's explain that line. Okay. Let's go to the second scenario. The second scenario is one guy says half, one guy says whole. Half, whole, right? What do we say? 3/4. It's talking about a sale. And there's an interesting idea here. Maybe we should say, look, the guy who says half, well, why is he saying half? Basically, he's generously acknowledging half the other guy's claim. So we should exempt him from an oath. Only the guy who says the whole thing should have to make the oath. The guy who says half should be exempt. So Gemara says, no. But that's what the Mishnah is coming to tell me. But why do they both have to make oaths? Because perhaps he's making up the story precisely so he shouldn't have to make an oath. Right? So he's actually not that great, generous guy. He's a total liar, but doesn't want to have to lie under oath. Okay. Okay, fine. So that's no good. Elameha, from this scenario. Two people are riding on an animal. Why do we have to invoke that scenario? That's an extra line in the Mishnah that teaches me that each one could acquire it on the other person's behalf. So this proves Ram Rachama's point. You can acquire a lost animal for somebody else. So the Gemara says not necessarily. Maybe the idea here is that riding an animal also acquires an animal. And we'll soon see that is a novel idea. We'll just get to it today. We'll probably get to it tomorrow. But yeah, there is some newness to the idea that a rider actually acquires an animal. We'll discuss more tomorrow. Elam Seifa. It's in the last line of the Mishnah. If they both admit or there are witnesses, they split without an oath. What are we referring to? Even obviously. Elalav bavametzia. In other words, if it's talking about a sale and they both bought it at the same time, obviously they split it equally. Elalav bavametzia. It's talking about a lost object. And the idea here is if they both picked up the lost object at the same time, either they admitted or there are witnesses, they don't need to make an oath. Well, then what does that mean? They both acquired it. How can they both acquire it? It must be that because each one acquires it for the other person. I acquire my own half plus the other guy's half. And Rabbi Merchama says, that means just like I could acquire half on behalf of my friend, I actually could also acquire the whole thing on behalf of my friend. And Rava says, no, it's a wrong principle. Because I could acquire it for myself, because I'm taking half, that's why I can acquire half on behalf of my friend. But to acquire the whole thing on behalf of my friend, that I would not be able to do. Okay, tomorrow we'll continue. Rabbi Brown will lead off with the discussion of the riding an animal versus walking an animal. And we'll see that there are some distinctions there.
8 o'clock.
Yeah, 8 o'clock.
Tomorrow, and then was that back to the Folio?
Oh.
Go back to the other daylight saving.